Hello and welcome back on Lit Up with Annie. In this session, we are continuing with the general prologue and we are going to talk about the merchant, the clerk, and the man of law. In the previous session, we talked about the monk and the friar, and this is the third session of the general prologue. If you have not seen the previous videos of the general prologue, please go and watch them, complete them, so that you have a good, thorough knowledge of the general prologue. I'm repeating this. It's very, very important. We have maximum questions from the prologue rather than the tales. More than the tales we have from the prologue. So please complete the prologue as soon as possible. Let's quickly begin. The merchant. A merchant was there with a forked beard. In motley and hay on horse he sat, upon his head a Flaunderish beware hat. Now Chaucer starts talking about the merchant and he says even a merchant was there, and the first characteristic that he gives about the merchant is that he had a forked beard. This has been a question in the exam. In motley and hay on horse he sat. The kind of clothes that he was wearing were multicolored, and he sat on the horse very, very elegantly. Upon his head a Flaunderish beware hat. He had a hat. Beware is an animal which has brown fur. So he was wearing that kind of a hat on his head. His boots clasped fair and fettishly. Even the boots that he was wearing were very nicely worn, they were very elegant. His reasons he spake full solemnly, sown in all ways tenscree of his winnings. His reasons, that means his opinions, his thoughts, he spoke of them in a very solemn manner. Sown in all ways tenscrees of his winnings. He was always concerned with how should I increase my profits? How should I increase my winnings? Well, he was a merchant after all. He want the sea were kept for anything, and he always wanted that the ship should be safe from other people, and he wanted to basically guard the sea at all costs. Betwixt Middleburg and Orwell, well knew he in exchange shields sell. So between Middleburg, that is Holland, and Orwell, that is England. So between Holland and England, he very well knew the exchange, the currencies. He knew them he knew about them in a very, very informative manner. This worthy man full well his wit beset, there wise no wit that he was in debt. So he was a very, very worthy man, and everybody knew of his wit nicely. But after all of this, nobody would actually say by talking to him, by seeing him, that he was in debt. So stately was he of his governance. He was so good with his governance, so good with everything that he did. Nobody could tell that he was in debt with his bargains and with his chevisons. So he was so good with his selling and buying, that he had a wit, but he was in debt. Forsooth, he was a worthy man withal, but sooth to say, I know not how men him call. So he was a worthy man with everybody, but I don't know what men call him, what his name was. So that's about the merchant that Chaucer talks about. He was dressed gaily. He was dressed in multicolored clothes, number one. Second, he has a forked beard. Third, he wore a beware hat. Fourth, he wore elegant boots. Five, he was always very witty and very wise with everybody. Six, he was in debt. Seven, we do not know his name. Next is the clerk. Chaucer says, a clerk there was of Oxenford also, that unto logic had long ago. He talks about the clerk and says that there was a clerk who was from Oxford, that unto logic had he long ago. He had studied he had studied logic quite a long time ago. As lean was his horse, as is the rake. Talks about the horse कि उसका horse भी एक rake की तरह बिल्कुल lean था. What is a rake? It's an instrument. पीछे एक डंडा होता है, आगे you must have seen comb shaped में it's that garden tool. So that's a rake. He has compared his horse with a rake, and he was not right fat, I undertake. Even the clerk was not fat, he says, but looked hollow and there too soberly. Even if you look at the clerk, he looked really hollow, matlab, he looked very, very thin and there too soberly, as if he was not into drinking and eating anything. Full threadbare was his overest coat-tape. The overcoat that he was wearing was also very threadbare, so not very nicely dressed, for he had gotten him yet no benefice. क्योंकि अभी तक he was not employed, he had not gotten him into any profits or employment. Nay, was so worthy to have an office. Chaucer says, उसको देख के लगता है कि he was not even worthy to have an office. For him was Lever have at his bed's head 20 books clad in black or red. Because, why? Because he was totally into, अगर उसका बस चलता, he would keep his head around 20 books, black or red, of Aristotle and his philosophy. So he was into reading. Then robes rich or fithel or gay sotry. So instead of buying rich clothes, instead of buying some good musical instruments, he would only spend money on good books. 20 books, 30 books he would take. But all be that he was a philosopher, yet had he but little gold in coffer. Yes, he was a philosopher, but still he did not have a lot of gold in his coffer, tijori. But all that he might of his friends hent on books and on learning, he it spent. Whatever he took from his friends, he would spend it on books and on learning. And busily again for the soul's pray. And he was he would very nicely, instead of returning the favor, he would just pray to the God very nicely to bless the souls who have, given him that money. Of him that gave him where with to school, of study book took he most cure and most heed. Some people gave him, things so that he could attend school, money. But he would just keep himself busy with the study. That's what he loved the most. Not a word spake he more than was need, and that was said in form and reverence. He wouldn't speak much. He would only speak as much as was necessary. But whatever he would speak would be in a very good manner, said in form and reverence, and short and quick and full of hay sentence. It would be very short, he would be very quick in his speaking, but whatever he will speak would be very elegant, would be very elevated kind of a speech. Sown in moral virtue was his speech. Pura morality wala speech. Sown in that morality speech was there. And gladly would he learn and gladly teach. He would gladly learn from everybody and he would gladly teach also. So this was the clerk. So the clerk was a scholar from Oxford. His horse is compared to a rake. Then he also looks very thin. He doesn't wear very nice clothes, threadbare. He spends time with his books mostly. He doesn't have employment. His friends give him some money for school and all, but he spends it all on learning and studying. And he's very good with his language. Next is man of laws. Even the picture shows that man of law. A sergeant of the laws, war and wise, that often had been at the Powis. So there was a sergeant also with them, and he was very prudent and very wise. often had been at Parvis. He would often spend his time at St. Paul's, where the lawyers would gather. There was also full rich of excellence. Even this person was rich with excellence. Discreet he was, and of great reverence. So he was also he had lots of knowledge. He was very discreet and great reverence. He seemed such, his words were so wise, just as he was full often in his size. So even his words were very wise, and at once he was also a judge in the courts of England. Assizes, courts of England were set in each country, in each county, in Wales also, which would administer the laws of crime. So उस तरह के जो ये छोटे छोटे कोर्ट्स सेट होते थे, वहां पे he had been a justice by patents and by plain commission. So he was given that authority. He was jurisdiction था उसके पास for his science and for his renown. Why? Because of his knowledge and because of how he was renowned. His reputation was very good. Of feasts and robes had he many on. He would take a lot of feasts from people, and he would have good robes had he many on. His basically yearly, the income that he had was also very good, such that he was great a purchaser, was nowhere known. He would buy a lot, lands and everything he had. All was fee simple to him in effect. Everything was very simple. Fees liya, fee simple. His purchasing might not be in fact. So you cannot question his purchasing. You cannot invalidate his purchasing. Nowhere so busy a man as he there was, and yet he seemed busier than he was. उससे ज़्यादा busy आदमी आपको नहीं मिलेगा. There were other people also of his rank, but they were also not that busy. फिर भी he would seem busier. इतना काम भी नहीं होता था, फिर भी वो he would seem like that, busier always. In terms had he case and dooms all that from the time of King William were fall. अपनी yearly book में he had all the cases and all the decisions that were made from the time of King William. Everything he had with him. There too he knew and died and make a thing. Therefore he knew how to write a petition, how to, he was very good with what he did because of this. There knew no bit pinch at his writing. Nobody could point out towards his writings. Nobody could find something faulty. And every statute knew he plain by rote. Statute is a law. So every law he knew by heart, by rote, ratta. He ruled but homely in a medal coat. Now what kind of clothes would he roam in? Again very colourful clothes, girt with a seant of silk with bars small. There was a belt on his clothes that was made of silk, and it had small stripes on it. Of his array tell I no longer tale. So Chaucer says that of his what he was wearing, I don't have anything much to say. So this is about the man of law. The man of law, Sergeant, he was prudent, he was wise, then he had very rich, superior qualities, very excellent qualities. He had been a judge in the court of assizes, then he had good knowledge, he had excellent reputation, he had grants of yearly income, and he was a great land buyer, purchaser. Nobody could invalidate his purchasings. He was busy all times. He had all the cases and decisions from the time of King William with him, and he knew every law by heart. He wore party-colored coat, which was girded with a belt of silk, and that's all that Chaucer tells us about him. So that's it for this session. I will meet you in the next session with next characters that Chaucer speaks about. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done that, and share it with as many people as possible. Thank you. I will see you later. Take care.